Welcome. Today we're going to break down something that's absolutely critical in modern data centers: how Cisco ACI handles services like firewalls and load balancers. We're talking about taking all the complexity of service chains and making it simple, smart, and totally automated right inside the network fabric.
All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start with why this is even a big deal. Then we'll get into the core modes ACI uses, managed versus unmanaged. After that, we'll look at some of the really cool tools like policy-based redirect and chaining, and then we'll put it all together. So first up, why should you care about any of this? Well, if you've ever worked in traditional networking, you know the pain. Getting traffic to go through a firewall, then a load balancer, it was a nightmare of complex cabling, VLANs everywhere, and rigid routing. ACI's whole goal here is to just get rid of that mess and replace it with a clean, policy-driven model. And that is the million-dollar question, right? This is precisely the problem ACI Service Graph was designed to solve. We're talking about a complete shift in thinking, away from manual VLAN stitching and all that fragile routing, and into a world where we can just tell the network what we want, and it figures it out. Okay, so you have your firewall, you have your load balancer, and you want to plug them into ACI. The very first decision you have to make is about how much control you want to give the fabric, and that really boils down to two options: managed mode and unmanaged mode. This image here really lays it out perfectly. Think of it as a sliding scale of automation. On the far left, you've got unmanaged mode, which is very hands-off. ACI just sets up the network path. But as you slide to the right, ACI gets more involved, all the way to where the ACI controller, the APEC, is actually configuring the service device itself. Let's start with unmanaged mode, because honestly, this is what you're going to see out in the wild almost all of the time. The division of labor is super clear here. ACI is the network expert. It handles the VLANs, the routing, all the fabric programming. But the actual configuration of the firewall rules, that's handled by you, or maybe your security team, or another automation tool. So why do it this way? It's all about flexibility. Maybe your organization has a killer DevOps pipeline for configuring firewalls, and you don't want to mess with that. Or maybe there just isn't a device package for the specific appliance you're using. Unmanaged mode lets you keep that external control while still getting all the network automation benefits from ACI. Now, on the other side of the coin, we had managed mode. And the dream here was pretty cool, right? The idea was that the APIC could be your one-stop shop. It would use a special piece of software called a device package, kind of like a driver, to log into the service device and configure it for you. One single place for both network and service provisioning. But, and this is a huge but, that you absolutely need to know if you're working with ACI today, this whole managed mode approach is deprecated. It turned out to be a massive headache to create and maintain device packages for every third-party vendor. Plus, most companies just preferred using their own tools anyway. So the bottom line today is simple: unmanaged mode is the official recommended way forward. Okay, so we've established that unmanaged mode is the way to go. You've got your firewall plugged into the fabric. The next big question is, how do you actually get traffic to it? This is where things get really fun and where we introduce one of ACI's most powerful features: policy-based redirect, or PBR. I mean, think about the old way of doing this. It was such a pain. You had to make the firewall the default gateway for your servers, forcing all of their traffic through it whether it needed to be inspected or not. It was rigid, it created all sorts of routing headaches. It was just a mess. Well, PBR just throws that entire model out the window. The magic here is that the fabric itself becomes the intelligent traffic cop. Your servers don't even need to know the firewall exists. You just create a policy that says, hey, anytime the web servers talk to the database servers, I want you to send a copy of that traffic to the firewall for a checkup. That's it. And the flow is just so elegant. First, you define your policy, which in ACI speak is called a contract. Then, when the fabric sees traffic that matches that contract, it just intercepts it, it detours the traffic over to the firewall does its thing, and then hands it right back to the fabric to continue on its way. It's completely seamless. So PDR is fantastic for actively steering traffic through a service. But what if you just want to get a copy of the traffic for monitoring? Or what happens when you need to send traffic through more than one service? Well, that brings us to our next set of tools: copy services and service chaining. Let's hit monitoring first. Traditional span is like a fire hose. It just blasts all traffic from a port at your monitoring tool. It's noisy and can even impact switch performance. ACI's copy service, on the other hand, is like a surgical laser. You use that same policy contract to say, I only want a copy of this specific conversation.
It's clean, precise, and way more efficient. Now, what about when one service isn't enough? That's where service chaining comes in. It's basically an assembly line for your packets. You can create a policy that says traffic from the web servers has to go to the firewall first, and then from the firewall it has to go to the load balancer before it finally gets to the application servers. You define the exact ordered path.
Okay, so we've covered all these different tools, unmanaged mode, PBR, chaining. The key takeaway is that these are not standalone features. They're Lego blocks. You snap them together to build the exact service path your application needs. And that final creation, that's what we call the service graph.
So let's look at a classic, really powerful example. You use unmanaged mode, so your security and apps delivery teams can keep using their own tools. You use PBR to magically redirect the right traffic to them, and you use service chaining to make sure it hits the firewall, then the load balancer in the right order. The result is a beautiful, fully automated service path, orchestrated by ACI, but with the flexibility everyone needs.
And this brings us to one final thought. We've seen this incredible evolution, right? We've gone from wrestling with cables and VLANs to having the network fabric act as an intelligent director for our traffic. As that line between the network and the services running on it gets blurrier and blurrier, the real question is, what comes next? How much smarter can the fabric get? That's the exciting frontier we're looking at now.